We did a story some time ago. What issue is this? In TNA, October 31st, 2022. And Bill Jasper had written about those review boards. And apparently we've had them here for a while. But anyway, Dr. Deladad, who is cited in Cleon Skouson's book, she talks about him. And she says they were a communist idea. And the idea was to somehow get the police out from under the control of elected officials and subject the police to the discipline of a civilian group which the party could infiltrate and control.
She was on the National Committee of the Communist Party.
Yes. And so is that saying that you get them under these police review boards and then you either infiltrate them or they're already full of activists? Is that the idea?
Well, they always appoint the activists. That's the problem. And even if you have one or two people on there that are pro-police, they're overwhelmed by the others.
Is that how they've worked?
Oh, always.
Have you had any experience? Do you know anything about these police review boards?
I mean, we had police and fire commissions in all the departments that I worked at. Again, we're talking smaller town Wisconsin versus New York, LA, some of those. So I definitely, would say there's significant differences. But I do think, again, Art was right. It's now those things are coming into officers' heads, that the back of their minds is, I don't want to end up on the news. I don't want to, and those are going through their mind as they're having to make some of those life and death decisions. And I think, unfortunately, that's where we're seeing some of this hesitation, and it's getting some police officers hurt. It's getting, their partners injured in some cases. So, and again, at the end of the day, there's this review board who may or may not understand what it's like to be in that situation. One of the greatest things I think some of the local departments did was they had some journalists come in and put a gun on the side and run them through some scenarios to see what that is like to make that kind of decision. Because it's really easy to on a Monday morning sit back and with your cup of coffee and say, well, they should have done this, they should have done that, until you're in that situation.
One of the crazy, and correct me if I'm wrong, is like one of the craziest ideas that I hear is that we need counselors instead of police officers come in. It seems like to the scene of a crime. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Obviously, did you want to elaborate on that?
Not particularly. I mean,
isn't that?
It's so inane. It just beyond discussion.
I can't tell if they're serious. Yeah, sometimes I wonder if they put something out there just to test to see how moronic people are. And the thing is, I have talked to some rather seemingly intelligent folks about these, and then they're serious. They think that, when you have a call, I used to cover courts and cops back in Montana when I was a journalist. And most of the domestic or the domestic violence calls, I think almost 98% of them had meth or alcohol involved.
Sure.
Like, these are not going to be rational people when you get there. No. I mean, does that sound accurate?
Again, I think the thought behind it was maybe
well-meaning, but maybe a little fantastical.
Yeah, I think so. If you look at it on paper, these emergency commitments or dealing with people who have mental health issues are just taking up an absorbent amount of resources and time of the police officers.
Right.
So the thought was, if we have a specialist in this field, but again, it goes back to accountability. So now you're asking the police officer to be accountable, and you're asking this person to be accountable. But when you take them to the hospital and they get turned over to your, social service department, they're so overwhelmed that they're not giving them the treatment they need. And so they're out the door 2 days later. And so did it really help on this end? Well, maybe it kept from having to use deadly force in a bad situation, maybe in some cases. But again, where's the follow through on the rest of it? Everybody's short staffed, and that person just gets put back on the streets.
Well,
another part of that is this: criminals don't think like normal people. These remedies are sold to normal people as if they are pretty good. And a normal person says, yeah, that'll work on, but they don't work on criminals, on the criminal mind. They just don't work.
Yeah, but you would think that a normal rational person would be able to observe and say, okay, this doesn't make any sense. Again, maybe they've never read a police report. They've never seen a court document. I mean, this stuff these are, again, most of these folks, they're not thinking rationally. Most of them are on drugs. From what I've seen, the region that I've covered out in north central Montana. And I'd imagine that's a reflection of a lot of places around here. And like you had mentioned, mental health. Mental health is huge. I think we can all agree that there's a great, I don't know what the percentage is, but there's probably a good chance that more than half of the people in prisons as well as in jails have some sort of mental health deficiencies and problems. And so I think there's some truth to that. I like to always make sure that we take a nuanced look. And obviously this problem or seemingly problem has a lot of moving parts in it. I wanted to talk about...
Well, let me say this. Back in the day, before we got into this touchy-feely stuff,
tell us, Art.
we could handle law and order a lot better than what we do today. Let's put it that way.
What do you mean?
We didn't try and psychoanalyze all this stuff.
Yeah.
We just, this is the law, you obey it, and when you don't, you go to jail. It's just that simple.
Like, that was your job as a police officer. Is it like, are you keeping the peace? Are they violating? If not, what do I do? You know, what's the next step? Do I arrest them, subdue them, whatever? And that's it. We don't sit there and bring the counselor in and have a session.
Yeah.
You know, watch out for that right hook. You know, it's like, okay, now that's, I mean, but that's a cultural problem. Everything is every touchy-feely. You're right, absolutely. I mean, that's a good old word.
One of the problems that we're dealing with is a general deterioration of morality across the board in the general population. And along with that is responsibility. And as people don't assume the responsibility for their own actions and for their families and et cetera, crime is going to go up.
Yeah.
It's that simple. And so we have to, and that's why it's disturbing to see an attack on religion across the country. Yeah. Religion teaches morality, and kids, when they grow up in that atmosphere, then they grow up to be better citizens. It's just that simple.
Yeah, it is that simple. I absolutely agree.